Hi guys. I hope you have followed the RESTful API tutorials so far. Subscribe to be notified of future tutorials. Let's learn how we can create a new request. We can either create it from the launch pad by using the new button or by clicking on these three dots and selecting Add Request. Let's give it a name, Get Petitions, and save it in the ePetitions collection. We now have a new empty request. The Get method has been selected automatically, but as you can see, we have access to all methods. But for now, let's work with Get because we are going to get all petitions from our /API/petitions endpoint testing the index action on the petitions controller. The request URL will be the full URL of our project as we displayed it in the browser. But before we send the request, let's make sure we are running PHP Artisan Server in our terminal. I'm going to click on this link which takes me to the project homepage, go to /API/petitions to see all petitions in the browser. Copy the URL and paste it in the request URL field in Postman. If you cannot remember the method or the endpoint we need to test, run PHP Artisan route list in your terminal. I'm going to use an additional terminal window so that I can keep PHP Artisan Server running in this one. We need to look at the petitions endpoint, not the other one. The method is get, the URL is API/petitions, and action is the index method of the petition controller. Let's go back to Postman and click send. If everything works as expected, we will receive a response with all petitions from this API endpoints. As you can see, the status is 200 OK, which means our request was processed successfully. We can also see how long it took to receive the response and what size it is. If I hover over the status code, I'll get a pop-up with some additional information, which is really useful, especially if we receive an unexpected status code. We can view the response in different formats, pretty, raw, and preview. But the pretty one is usually the prettiest. So let's stick with that. If you wanted to visualize the response, Postman has tutorials to tell you how to do it. It's a really interesting feature. Now that we have created this request, let's go to the top by clicking on the X and save changes so that we can come back to it later. Let's test the store method to make sure that we can create a new petition. Looking at the PHP Artisan route list output, we can see that the method will be post, the URI will be API/petitions, and the action is the store method on the petitions controller. If everything works, we will be able to create a brand new petition using Postman, increasing the total number of petitions from 50 to 51. We need to create a new request, and I will do that by clicking on the new button. I'll call it Post a Petition, save it in the ePetitions collection, and I will choose to post method from the dropdown. The request URL is exactly the same as the one we used in our Get Petitions request from the last video. So I'll just copy it over. Sending a post request is slightly more complicated because we have to create the body of the request ourselves. Switch to the Body tab, click Raw, and select JSON. To make it easier, we can simply copy one of the petitions from the previous GT request, but make sure you include the curly braces and don't have the trailing comma at the end. That would break the request. Believe me, I've been there many times. Let's change the title to Hello and the author to Jane Doe. I'm also going to delete the ID value because the ID will be assigned automatically. Let's click Send now. We consider the status is 201 created, which is a success status. And here in the response window are the details of the petition we just created. Let's go back to the Get Petitions request and scroll all the way down to see that we have 50 petitions at the moment. But as soon as we send the request again, we will receive 51 petitions back. Our brand new petition will be at the end. Fantastic. This means that our store method is working as it should. Let's close the Post a Petition tab by clicking on the X and save changes. Let's test the show method and display a single petition, our newly created petition with ID 51. Create a new request, call it Get a Petition, and make sure that the Get method is selected. Let's see the route list again to see what our endpoint is. API/petitions/petition is the URI, which means we have to add a petition ID at the end of the URL string. Let's go back to the first GET request we created to copy the URL again, ID of our petition 51. Click Send and here we go. We receive a status code 200 OK. And our response contains the details of a petition with the ID of 51, which means our endpoint and the store function is working as it should. Take a note of what the output looks like. We can set a data object with a title, category, description, author, and signees. Let's go back to PHP Storm and change what the output should look like in the petition resource file. Let's comment out the author and signees quickly. Save the changes and send a GET request in Postman again. There you go. The response has changed accordingly. We no longer see the author and signees there. This shows that our petition JSON resource is working as it should too. Well done. Before we go, let's change to petition resource back to what it was before. Let's send the request again to make sure that the data is back to what it was. We can now close the Get a Petition tab. Let's test the update method of the petitions controller. Create a new request, give it a name, update the petition, and save it in the ePetitions collection. By the way I named the request is just a personal preference. You can choose your own naming convention. When updating a resource, you can choose between the put and patch HTTP verbs. We spoke about a difference between these two earlier in the course. But even if you are not sure which one to use, you can look at the route list. You can see that Laravel will accept either of them. I'm going to choose patch. The request URL will be the same one as the one we used in saving a new petition. We will use the petition variable and add the petition ID at the end. Let's update the petition with ID 20. Updating a resource is similar to creating a new one in Postman, since we have to create the body of the request ourselves. Switch to the Body tab, click Row, and select JSON. Let's go to the Get a Petition request and request the details of the petition with ID 20. I'm going to copy the details of this petition, paste it in our new request, and change the title to New Title. Again, don't forget to include the curly braces because there have been many times when I forgot them and wondered why the request failed. I would still get a 200 OK response because instead of updating the resource, Postman is simply displaying the original data. Actually, let me show you what I mean. Let's remove the curly braces and click Send. Yes, the status code is still 200 OK, but the title has not changed. If we add the curly braces back and send the request again, it will change. This shows that the endpoint and the update method is working. Let's close the tabs and save the changes. The last method we need to test is the destroy method, which will take a specific resource and delete it. Let's create a new request, call it delete a petition, and select the delete HTTP verb from the drop-down. We use the petitions variable and append the ID of the petition we want to delete. Let's say ID number 25. Let's click Send and see what happens. This time, the response we receive contains an empty body and a status 204 no content. This is the status code we define in a destroy method. Let's go back to PHP Storm, the petition controller, and change it to something else, just to make sure that the status code will change in our response. I'm going to use the response class to return the status code. A fun code is 418. I'm a teapot. This response status code is just a joke and not really implemented in production. But it's a fun one to use in this scenario. Let's run the request again, and this time let's delete a petition with ID 13. And here we have our 418 I'm a teapot status code. If you hover over it, the pop-up will tell you a little bit more information about where this code came from and why. To make sure this petition has really been deleted, let's reuse our Get a Petition request and paste the ID of 13 at the end of the URL string. Let's click Send and see what happens. The response body we receive back is HTML 404 page, and the status code is 404 not found. We can also check our database to see that the petition has been deleted, and yes, it has. There is no petition with ID 13 anymore. You now have a good understanding of how to use Postman to test API. You can take this further and learn even more about what Postman has to offer to your API development workflow by using the official documentation and tutorials. I'm going to close the tabs now and save the changes. This brings us to the end of these courses. By completing these courses, you now have a basic understanding of what RESTful APIs are and how we can build APIs in Laravel. This is a great starting point to explore more RESTful APIs and build more complex API solutions. Also, make sure to stay up to date with Laravel as this framework is actively being developed and improved. If you enjoyed what you learned, please support our channel by subscribing, liking, and commenting to produce more tutorials. Thanks for watching and building RESTful APIs in Laravel.